Welcome to episode 2 of Leaders of Enchantment podcast. Today's podcast features my interview with the new football coach at the University of New Mexico, Bronco Mendenhall. Bronco has an impressive football background, having had previous head coaching stops at BYU and Virginia, in both cases inheriting challenging programs. However, and in both cases, he turned the programs around fairly quickly, achieving bowl eligibility at BYU within his first season and doing the same at Virginia in season 2. What impresses me most about Bronco, however, is his philosophy and commitment to teaching, not just football, but also life skills that go way beyond football. It's very clear to me that Bronco cares deeply about his players and staff. I don't know what the future holds for Lobo football, but I am highly optimistic after getting to know Bronco over these past few months. I commented to Bronco towards the end of the podcast that he should consider writing a book, and I really meant it. He's an incredibly deep-thinking person, extremely articulate, and he has a wonderful philosophy on life. So hopefully at some point he takes me up on that suggestion, but only after he brings home a championship for Lobo football. Now to the joys of the timing difference between when this podcast is recorded and when it's being released. You'll hear several references to alignment within the University of New Mexico leadership, and it being a significant part of why he chose to come here, which I assure you he didn't have to. There's no doubt in my mind that he chose the University of New Mexico amongst other offers that were likely more lucrative. So I'm recording this introduction in mid-August, specifically the week before the season opening game, and just yesterday it became public that the University of New Mexico's athletic director, Eddie Nunez, accepted the same position at the University of Houston. This is a great move for Eddie and a great opportunity for he and his family. I wish nothing but the best for Eddie, and I respect the fact that he is leaving this athletic department in a much better position than how he found it. All of this being said, my optimism for UNM athletics and football in particular is unwavering. Despite Eddie's departure, the alignment that Bronco refers to is still there, and I have the utmost confidence in UNM's president, Garnet Stokes, in maintaining this alignment. Anyway, with that, I hope you enjoy this episode. Bronco Mendenhall, welcome to the Leaders of Enchantment podcast.
My pleasure. Good to see you.
I really appreciate you being here. First of all, who are you and what is it you do?
Wow. Bronco Mendenhall. I'm the head football coach at the University of New Mexico. But that's really not what I do.
I know.
My passion, the development of young people, and not just any type of young people, resilient, successful, productive, contributing, and grateful young people.
I love it. Put a pin in that. We'll unpack that. You know, this being an origin story podcast, though, I really want to talk about your career and life journey. And let's start with the basics. Oh, here's a funny one. And by the way, just like any student, my greatest resource is your page on Wikipedia or your LinkedIn profile. In your case, Wikipedia. In the case of Donna, her LinkedIn profile. So your full name is Marc Bronco Clay Mendenhall.
That's it.
Yeah. Why Bronco?
Great question. 3 brothers,
Okay.
Mike, Matt, Marty. And so the M of Mark is just because to follow the theme. So again,
Okay.
But my dad grew up in the ranching business.
Okay.
And somewhere along the line, he was just getting, at that stage kind of his life, he was just finishing a pretty successful real estate and developer. He's a land developer.
Okay.
Moving back to this idea of horses and agriculture. And he and my brothers thought, yeah, Bronco would be a cool name. Mom was against it. Actually,
Are you the youngest?
I'm the youngest.
So the baby?
6-year difference between myself and my next oldest brother.
Okay.
Really active.
So you really were the baby.
Oh, yeah. Really active and athletic family. Anyway, dad and brothers then, because they were headed toward the horse business, my dad was Bronco. My brothers thought that was so cool. Mom, no. Grandparents, no. But it ended up Bronco, and never have ever used Mark.
Technically, so your legal, what does your driver's license say?
Bronco Clay.
It does?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Actually, Bronco C, not even Clay.
So what happened to Mark?
Just kind of as formality, and I've never, ever been called Mark, never used it on anything.
So even as a kid?
Never.
That's fun. What does your passport say?
Bronco.
So
Bronco
that is your
Clay.
legal name.
Mm-hmm.
That's fascinating. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm asked all the time, and it fits much better as the years go on and the story goes on, because the agriculture and the horses became how I grew up.
Yeah.
But it didn't start that way.
That's awesome. Where did you grow up?
Salt Lake City, Utah.
So you're a city kid.
Up on the avenues, up by the University of Utah until 5th grade. Then my family moved out to Utah County, which is out near Provo, Utah. Alpine is the name of the area.
We're going south.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yep. So right past the point of the mountain, a small town called Alpine. It was small then, a farming community. It's where Silicon Slopes is now in Utah. Just it's industrialized, but back when I grew up, just ranching and open land. Grew up on 40 acres, and yeah, the horse operation about, maybe 50 horses in training. It was cutting horses, and you need cattle for cutting horses, so maybe 200 head of cattle.
I saw that in your video. Can you define to me what cutting a horse is?
Yeah, so a cutting horse, if you think back to the cowboy days and cowboys pushing a herd of cattle from, let's just say, I don't know, Amarillo to Omaha, wherever.
Okay.
So the cowboys are pushing the cattle. Well, along the way, sorting needs to be done. And sorting would be something like sifting the mama cows from the baby cows, or cutting sick cows out of the herd to doctor them, cutting cows out of the herd to brand them. Well, so as you go in with a horse to cut a cow out of the herd, that cow wants to get back to the herd. They're herd animals.
Okay.
So you position your horse between the herd and the cow that you've cut out. It's trying to get back into the herd. Your horse is basically guarding it one-on-one, not letting it back into the herd. That then became competition. To like the cowboys would say, I bet I can keep that cow out longer than you without hardly steering my horse, because my horse is so cowy.
Your horse went into autopilot.
Pretty much, yeah. And so cutting competitions, you go in, you cut a cow out of the herd. It's a 2.5 minute competition or run, and every visible cue is a mark down. And so literally it should appear that you walk in, cut a cow out of the herd, and really the horse does everything else.
You're just along for the ride.
Exactly right. And they're down so low that many times dirt is getting in your boot, and they're much like corners playing man-to-man or a point guard defending. And it's like that, except someone's on your back. And so the horses are built much like corners and point guards, lower to the ground, super quick, to the point where when they're born, these colts come out, and the first rides, which I was riding 12 to 15 colts per day in our operation, and that's first rides where they're bucking and they're just learning. So it's not breaking, it's starting, which is a whole different thing in a mindset. So a lot of times we would start, and maybe the second or third ride we'd put the colt in with me on their back with a cow in a round pen, and that colt.
So a colt being a completely untrained.
Exactly right. Okay. And so we would call them a long yearling. That's just, and they just had enough strength to maybe carry a passenger at that time, if he was a kid like myself.
Okay.
So I'd get on, and literally the cow gave the colt a reason to move and in what direction. That would link them to any cues I was giving through hackmore or bridle or whatever. Many times I wouldn't have to do anything because it was already so embedded in them that they would follow, stop, start a cow even before they'd been trained.
Interesting.
And
okay.
So anyway, bloodlines, genetics, a huge part of it. But yeah, I grew up doing that.
That's funny. I watched this video last night. I'm like, what is he? He keeps referring to cutting.
Yeah.
What is that?
So cowboy way of life.
Okay.
And so a lot of times going back, once the cow was cut out of the herd, especially if it took off running wild on the plains or the pastures, right, that's when they'd come in with a rope and rope it.
Yep.
Because, right, it's, you got to get it back. So anyway, lots of different disciplines.
Okay. And horses, in doing my research on you, I didn't realize what a critical part of your world they really are. That came from your dad, that Genesis. How, being around horses so much, how's that shaped you as a person?
Oh, man, I would say it's been the most impactful, more than probably any person. The ability to communicate is super important, and communicate effectively, which you can't do unless you're speaking another person's language. Not only the words, but the tone and the learning preference.
Yeah.
And so there are many people, right, that, man, they're emotional and they're sensitive, and others are big picture thinkers, and others really like the facts, and others like the outline form. And so if you think about holistic thinking, man, as I get to know you and vice versa, I'm going to try to communicate with you in your learning preference so we can connect and understand. Not mine, but yours. And how am I going to do that unless I know about you?
Yep.
And so I pay attention, right, to subtle cues and looking what the offices are designed like, just listening to language, listen to people describe their day, and they might be sequentially. I woke up at 6 and then went and got my coffee and then went to the shower, and then already there's a sequence and an outline. I'm just paying attention, and so then I try to communicate with them in a sequence and outline form. Or they might say, yeah, I woke up, it was 72 degrees outside, 30% humidity, already there's been facts laid out within one sentence. And so clearly the data matters to that person. Or they might wake up and say, man, this is the best day of my life. And in this period, in the horizons, and right, then you're thinking big picture. And so really trying to connect through metaphors, etc. So the horses, they're all different as well. And they literally are as different as people. And so some I would go to their stall to grab them every day, and they would literally run to the door, put their head out, ready to be haltered and just work, and then wanted to please. And that's a completely different experience in working with that animal than one when you walk in, they run to the end of the pen, turn their rear end to you, and are anxious to kick you if they can. Yeah. And then catch me, after we battle. But this is going to be, if you want to do this, it's going to be on my terms. This is the animal talking to me.
No, I understand.
And let's just get clear on what the rules are. And I'm not going to like you along the way. And there's trust that has to be earned. And so really looking for the subtle, nonverbal, looking for the subtle clues as to how really to connect, how really to communicate, has allowed me to coach over my career with a pretty quiet voice. And so that's important to me.
You took a skill set that you learned essentially growing up about how to train horses to do what you want. And I hear you loud and clear. You've got to put yourself in their shoes, so to speak. And then you've translated that to humans.
I have.
That's awesome.
So there's a few great documentaries for our listeners, too. If they're interested in this train of thought, there's a documentary called Buck. Okay. And it's about Buck Brenneman. And he's,
I'm going to write this down.
Yeah, it's worth watching. And the movie, The Horse Whisperer.
Buck Brenneman? Brenneman, okay.
And so that movie the movie The Horse Whisperer was based on him. He actually studied under and was mentored. Go ahead.
I forgot to mention, we are 15 feet away from the train
tracks. It's organic. Anyway, but Buck Brenneman studied under another. And so it just is, but The Horse Whisperer, if people have ever gone to the movies and watched that movie, that was based on him. Anyway, my father along the way from the beginning of breaking colts, which was the bucking and as wild and as cowboy as could be, that quickly transformed into inviting and subtle, but with high demands.
And our train today's Amtrak. I've actually gotten to know the trains. I know the difference between Amtrak and Rail Runner. The Rail Runner makes the whole table shake.
And actually, I would say it shifted also from demands to expectations and inviting and asking rather than expecting and rather than, forcing. And so I would say my coaching career is shifted similarly along the way. The demands have lowered, yet the expectations have increased.
The demands have lowered?
Demands have lowered, which means me demanding, me asking, and me expecting has raised.
Got it.
So those are two completely different things.
No, I misunderstood you.
Yeah.
Okay, I got it. And we'll get there. So you've always been athletic. What did you play as a youth?
Growing up, so baseball, and really a strong baseball career. In fact, scholarship offers to play baseball out of high school, more so than football. And so anyway, baseball and football growing up. Wasn't really a basketball kid. And the winter times, I was working with my dad, writing and doing that. And so the agricultural life was everything other than football and baseball. My father, played at Brigham Young University football. Then had a chance with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Okay. My oldest brother, his name's Michael. So backcountry, he is, one of the kind of founders of a group that basically ski to die. I mean, they summit and they.
That's my world.
That's him. He's one of the.
So he's a big time backcountry skier.
One of the best mountaineers.
Where's he based?
Utah, and then he lived for a long time in Santa Cruz. So surfer, skier, has lived in a yurt for most of his life.
No kidding.
And so so that's my oldest brother. My next oldest, second.
Hold on, before you go, listeners can't see it. I'm wearing a hat. On my hat, it says Aspect Avi.
I see it.
This is a company up in Crested Butte. And the gentleman there, he's a long-time ski guide, and he's developed an app for essentially avalanche tracking. And he maps LiDAR data with slope angle and then contours it and stuff like that. If your brother... if he's that into the backcountry ski space, I'll bet he's familiar with Aspect Avi.
I would know he's familiar with anything, and he looks at the mountains from just the ranch there in Utah, and he's so skilled in the intuition, and he describes it so clearly. Not only the science, but then the intuition of when he's there and the things he's looking for and the clues are just...
It's amazing.
He spent his whole life in the mountains.
I'm not formally trained in that area. I actually would like to. It's not a trivial undertaking. But yeah, it's a science.
Yeah.
I mean, digging the pit, looking at the layers, and so on and so forth. And, up where I'm at in Crested Butte, man, a kid, he was on his 8th run of the day. This was on the anthracites, and he died in an avalanche.
Yeah.
It's just a horrible story.
So that's my brother's world, and to do that long, and you have to be really skilled, because just as you described, I mean, the risk and the conditions change so quickly and subtly.
Yep.
But anyway, he spent his entire life in the mountains.
Okay.
That's my oldest brother.
Yep.
And most of his life, long dreadlocks and just mountains and Santa Cruz when he's not in the mountains surfing. And he managed a lighthouse there, the Pigeon Point Lighthouse, for a long time.
Yeah, I know that.
Anyway, my next oldest brother, his name was Matt, and 2nd round draft pick by the Redskins.
Oh, cool.
NFL, but he lives in Northern California on over 100 acres. He also lives in a yurt. My family loves the outdoors, and they they're introverted people who like their space.
How long of a career in the NFL did your brother have?
So he played 4 years, one on the injured reserve. His last year they beat Miami for the Super Bowl championship when he was at the Redskins. So he started for them, and kind of a typical career. Very few make it to their second contract, either through ability or injury. His case was injury. And there's things that happened, as defensive lineman, which he played, that's hard on your body. So there's residue. He's got significant issues, back and elbow, and I think so there's also challenges cognitively for so many linemen, the volume of hits. And so those are all real things for our listeners to acknowledge. So the sport does come with, over time, especially at the professional level, and especially over time, there's some risk that way. But his passion, custom motorcycles and Harleys and choppers. Cool. And so every year, for a long time, every year, all of us as brothers would get on our motorcycles and go cross country for about, a week or so in the summers to reconnect.
You do that once a year? Good for you.
Really fun.
And then, just the 3 brothers?
Yep, myself and the 3 brothers, or if one can't go, whoever can go. And so we did that for a long time.
Okay.
And then my next oldest brother, so
you're one of
4.
4.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I thought we were stopping at 3.
Next oldest, 3rd degree in martial arts, as well as doctorate in world religion and psychology. Works juvenile corrections. So with kids that just
there's another calling,
are waiting to be aged out. Teaches as well. So again, doctorate, martial arts, former bodybuilder, Mr. Utah, and football
Mr.
player.
Utah.
Yeah, so super accomplished and athletic family, and you kind of had to do that to belong. And so that's what I was chasing. 6 years younger than my next oldest, so I was playing up from the minute I was born.
Yeah. So you had some big shoes to fill.
Yeah. But really, when folks see me as more conservative and more traditional in what I do, when they see my brothers,
as a football coach,
and I would just say maybe more mainstream.
You don't have dreadlocks.
Exactly. So when they see my brothers roll in, it's just like wow, and the players as well, which is really fun. Yeah.
So you moving into post high school, again, according to your Wikipedia page. Snow College and Oregon State. I had to look up Snow College. Yeah. I'd never heard of it. So this might come as news to you. So enrollment's 5,900. So small-ish.
Junior college.
Yep, junior college. One of the oldest junior colleges west of the Mississippi. Another little tidbit I didn't know. And then oddly enough, it offers bachelor's degrees in music, nursing, and software engineering.
Yeah.
Huh. What now? Did you choose? Did you go and play football?
I did. Yeah.
Okay.
And I just barely gave their commencement speech last year.
You did.
It really fun.
That's awesome.
So that was really my only scholarship offer.
That was it?
Out of high school to play football.
Okay.
So I had larger offers in baseball.
Why did you go football?
Great question. It felt like, as I reflect back on that time, to be part of my family, it kind of felt like a rite of passage where if you weren't football, you weren't as good, right? My brother Marty played as well. I didn't mention that. But it just kind of felt like that's what this family does.
So you would have been odd man out
I kind of felt,
gone baseball.
As I look back, I think there was kind of this, I don't know, belonging acceptance criteria that wasn't stated, but I felt. And so I kind of, So went to Snow College, and gosh, we won a national championship. So my second year.
What'd you play, by the way?
Corner. Defensive back. And so I've been a captain of every team I've been on since Little League, which that's crazy for someone.
I mean, you're a born leader. You're a natural leader.
Well, I wasn't aspiring to be, right? It just is like...
It just happens.
It's crazy. So anyway, win a national championship, and I think when I'm finished at Snow College that Brigham Young University is close. That's where my dad went, brothers, and so I kind of just, I don't know, I thought that's where I'd end up, but they didn't recruit me. And so I was bitter about that, based on my lack of maturity kind of at that time. And so literally...
You obviously got over that.
Yeah. So the schools remaining that wanted me to go play for them, I literally looked at who has BYU on their schedule, and that became my number one criteria for selection. Exactly right.
That's awesome.
So here's all these other criteria to choose a university to go develop yourself, right, and have this wonderful future. And I'm using, who plays them as my criteria.
And so you played, 2 seasons at Snow? You won your national championship.
Yeah.
And then you went to Oregon State?
Because?
And so BYU just
BYU's on their schedule.
The same conference?
Nope.
This would have been, what year was this?
Long time ago.
Is it so before Mountain West?
Yeah.
So this was the old WAC days.
Mm-hmm. And so Oregon State was in the Pac-10 at that time. And BYU would have been in the WAC. So I choose Oregon State, and they had, I think, 23 straight years of losing. Which, by
the way, there's a pattern. So we're going to get to that.
There is. So I go there, and anyway, we come into Provo to play BYU my junior season, and Oregon State wins. We win.
How'd you feel?
I lay spread eagle on the 50-yard line in that stadium.
On top of the big Y?
Kind of doing a grass angel like you would a snow angel. And it was great.
Who was there? Was your family there?
My family was there, yep.
High school coaches,
brothers there. And
so everybody was there?
It was cool. And I got up after the game to walk to the locker room.
Most importantly, what kind of gear were they wearing?
Yeah, the Oregon State gear. Even though they're BYU
Even though
people.
They were, okay, family first.
First, last, and always.
First, last, and always.
Yep.
Good.
And so I get up to walk in the locker room, but that was the first time I then thought, what have I done? Where am I? So I went to Oregon State with the primary goal to beat BYU.
And you just did it.
Yeah.
And then you felt lost.
While I was walking off the field, I'm still on the grass. And I'm thinking, well now what?
What's next?
I mean, so that was as short-sighted as my decision was.
Did you have BYU on the schedule the next season?
No. So I think many of us, right, we're so passionate about a short-term metric that we never even ask, where will this lead? And
so you had no plan.
I had no plan. And
how'd you write that?
Writing that, I would say.
You went back to your happy place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so that's just a powerful narrative. So short-term things can be accomplished even without knowing where they're going to lead. But gosh, I would suggest thinking about where the short term,
putting it in the context of a broader plan
and perspective of a broader plan, I would.
Bronco, that's an awesome story. It's really
It's
cool.
real. I mean, I would have been walking off the field just thinking it was the happiest and one of the best moments of my life, and it had already faded from the time I got up off the Y symbol. I hadn't even made it off the grass yet.
The joy of what you just accomplished.
And then it was, now what? And what have I done? And what am I going to do? And
this was your first year at Oregon State, so you'd have been a junior, correct?
Yep.
So how was the next season?
Team captain the next year. Slight progress, but still Oregon State. We didn't have a winning season. I had aspirations to be an NFL player. That didn't happen. I wasn't good enough. And
At what point did you realize that? When did that reality dawn on you?
man, I started in the world of football. Sometimes you get what's called stingers, and that means when you make contact, your spinal column is shrunk a little bit, and so the nerve touches the edge and it starts sending tingling down your arm, and pain down your neck on contact, and so those started to happen, and so that was the first inclination of this is going to be hard to sustain. I started to be cognizant of it when I was playing, of it's changing the way I play.
So you started wrapping your head around the consequences of football.
Yeah, and I still wanted to play. So did a lot of work with my neck and strengthening it and different things. But anyway, the reality just of what that was going to take and my ability level, and with all that, yeah, it was not going to happen. So I tried, but I didn't really have a great opportunity.
Hypothetical, if you were drafted, what would you have done?
I would have played.
You would have?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So it wasn't enough to prevent you?
It wasn't.
Okay.
No, it was just something to work through.
Okay.
Is how I viewed that.
Okay. By the way, how are you today?
I'm great. And so I still have the same issues, but I can manage it well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, then not knowing, so again, still learning about long term, I wasn't clear yet what I truly wanted to do. When the NFL opportunity wasn't going to happen, the coaches at Oregon State came to me and said, would you like to be a graduate assistant coach? I hadn't thought about coaching yet.
But they clearly saw something in you.
They saw something, and so they gave me that opportunity, which I was appreciative of, because I could do my master's work, and that was in education, teaching, and that allowed me some time.
So you got both a bachelor's and a master's from Oregon State?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah. And in education while getting some practical coaching experience, but the coaching experience wasn't the driver, that was just the facilitator to continue my education. Once I graduated, I then started to think about, well, how then do I want to apply teaching, to whom, what context, and I love motivated learners. Where and how could I have maybe the most scope, scale, and impact? And this idea of teaching and coaching, yeah, that started to merge. And yeah, that's where I finished, at least my Oregon State experience after I graduated.
Okay. And so I'm going to just like kind of summarize your coaching career in just a bullet list format here in my notes. So, and this is something I acknowledge, is that in your profession, you guys have to move around a lot. And it's not just unique to you. Even the athletic staff, as I talk to them, for those guys to advance their careers, you kind of got to jump around.
You do.
And so you, if by my count, I think you had, a total of like 8 or 9 stops. So you obviously you brought up Oregon State. You actually boomeranged back to Oregon State, 95, 96. You spent 2 years at Snow, your alma mater. 2 years at Northern Arizona in Flagstaff. Love that place. Then you were here in Albuquerque.
For 5.
And before we hit the record button, we do have some similarities in that you and I, we didn't know each other obviously, but we were here both at UNM late 90s, early 2000s, and then we both came back roughly around the same time, 20 plus years later. And then you had a nice long stay in BYU, then 6 years Virginia, then what I'll call a sabbatical. And now you're back at UNM. So I'm always fascinated by careers that require you to move around so much, especially when you've got kids in tow. Talk to me about that. Is that something you love? Is it just the nature of the beast? Do you tolerate it?
So it certainly wasn't aspired to, and isn't ideal. And so as Holly and I were starting...
So you're not wired to constantly pull up stakes and move on to the next place?
I'm not wired to pull up stakes and leave. I am wired for unbroken growth and achievement.
Okay.
And I hate boundaries, and I don't like ceilings.
Man, you and I are really similar.
If someone starts to become complacent, or an organization, or a leadership group, or resources start to become stagnant with no vision to then continue on, they start to lose me.
Yep.
I don't like this idea of limitations or boundaries. I like anything is possible, and let's pursue that. And I like aligned people.
So as a consequence, you're eventually going to hit the end of the road with an organization, and you're going to need to move on.
Unless they actually don't think there's limits. Unless they think anything can be done within their scope, within their sphere, within their scale, that they think, wait, we can do something that's never been done and want to keep doing it. And then if we can't innovate in a way to then do it a different way to bust through boundaries, that's captivating to me.
Okay.
And so the ascent was rapid. Defensive coordinator, my first job out of college at Snow, 2 seasons, and then Northern Arizona.
And by the way, were you married at the time? Mm-hmm. So your wife is accompanying you. Your kiddos weren't born until...
Not even until my 3rd year here.
They were born in...
Here?
Yeah, so
my
you
first
started
was born
your
in
family
Albuquerque.
here in Albuquerque. Okay, so you had a decent chunk of your career where it was just the two of you.
Yeah, but a fast ascent. So I was back at Oregon State as the defensive coordinator, I think 5 or 6 years out of college. And that... before I even knew what I was doing. And all of a sudden
and is
I'm
that
back.
Unheard of?
Unheard of.
Okay.
It's fast.
Okay.
And then kind of a resetting. Our staff was released there and fired. When head coach goes, usually the staff goes.
It's kind of harsh.
Yep, so that happens there. I end up in Louisiana at Louisiana Tech for 9 months before I come to New Mexico.
I forgot about
That's
Louisiana
okay.
Tech.
Anyway, so I'm here 5, then BYU for 13. Never really aspiring to be a head coach, but I become the head coach there. So 11 years I'm at BYU as the head coach, 13 total, 2 as a deep.
So
as
you
assistant.
Joined as what, a defensive coordinator?
Yeah.
Okay.
They hired me away from there.
And then you slid over.
And then after 11 years at BYU, 6 as the head coach at Virginia. So the last 17 years of my career have been as a head coach.
You have a bit of a pattern. And your pattern, so you joined BYU. BYU at the time wasn't doing super great, which was your team because you were a defensive coordinator. What happened to that coach? Was that coach let go?
He was.
Wow.
One of my best friends.
Which is super unusual that then the defensive coordinator on that same team is then elevated.
That's it. It's a unique story and a pretty atypical story. The head coach at that time was a good friend of mine, and one of the reasons I left New Mexico to go to BYU, besides where I'm from, and it's my faith, so lots of alignment, but a primary reason was for who? To try to help.
To go to work for this gentleman. And what's his name?
Gary Croton was his name.
Okay.
And they weren't playing great defense at the time, so I was hired to address that, which we did. But it wasn't enough. So there had been 3 losing seasons.
Okay.
And at BYU, that's not okay.
And you were on 2 of those. Okay.
And so a change is made. The athletic director is also fired. So the head coach and athletic director.
Because of football? Okay.
In terms of the market, right? Football generates the revenue.
No, I understand. I understand.
Yeah.
But yet then they turn to another coach on that same team.
So they actually try to hire 2 other coaches first.
Okay.
And neither will take the job. It's a challenging job. It's a challenging position. Many view the standards there as not an advantage, but a disadvantage, meaning, 98.5% of all the students at BYU are of one faith. The honor code, which are part of their beliefs, no alcohol, no tobacco, no premarital sex, hair above the ear, off the collar, church attendance Sundays.
Which you just define a normal college experience.
Pretty much. 85% of my teams over that time were return missionaries. That means they'd stop their career for 2 years to go and serve. Come back, 75% spoke a foreign language on my team, and up between 30 and 40 per year, on average, were married.
Hold on. So on average, and by the way, is this still true today? A BYU squad is going to be exactly 2 years older than most other teams.
By percentage, some will be because of their missionary service. So not everyone goes. On my teams, again, 85% were. And so many think, man, what a giant advantage because of maturity.
Yeah.
And so it certainly can be. You just have to manage basically a 7-year succession plan rather than 5 in terms of your roster management.
Will they typically come in for a couple of years, then go do their missionary years, then return?
It's 2 things. They'll either leave right out of high school and go on their mission, or usually come for a semester and then leave in the December-January period. Mm-hmm. So when they come back, it's December-January. They have the off season, they have spring practice, they have summer training, and then they have a chance to be ready.
And a mission's 2 years.
2 years.
So how are they staying fit in that time?
They're not.
Oh.
So there's 30 minutes allotted, so they're up. Missionary schedules are very rigorous. Mm-hmm. So usually 6 to 6:30 is training. That means physical training, and that's push-ups and sit-ups, or maybe going for runs.
It's not like you got a gym, probably.
Totally.
You yourself.
And usually they're not allowed to go to a gym anyway.
Okay.
Then personal study, then companion study, and then they're literally knocking on doors and or serving the entire day, and then they're in their homes usually at 9:30 at night, and then repeat. And usually a country speaking a language that they had to learn, and they're away from home. It's an amazing challenge. So I have 3 sons, they've all served. Mm-hmm. So anyway, those kids come back, but sometimes someone might have left as a defensive back and would come back as an offensive lineman weight. Like they'd put on so much weight.
Oh, wow.
Sometimes they'd leave as an offensive lineman at 270 and come back at 215 pounds.
Sometimes, just because of all the walking?
Yep. And or the culture, sometimes parasites, sometimes where they serve. I mean, it's third world-ish.
Yeah.
So again, 75% of those teams spoke a foreign language. And so I guess my point is a really unique and different dynamic to design for. So anyway, they offered the job to a couple different coaches. Neither took it. So I wasn't their first choice. Interim athletic director then, trying to become the athletic director, is kind of given the power to make this choice. And the defensive players at BYU, without me knowing, go to the interim AD and just say, we want this guy to be our coach. And I was really the last resort. If you're thinking of college football coaching experience with a credible resume and a member of that faith, which are all a criteria, they were kind of desperate. And the players go, again, to interim athletic director. Somehow he's given the power, approved by the president, to make that choice. And I'm really given the job, I would say, as a placeholder. Like the body language and tone was, yeah, congratulations, you have the job. But my reading between the whole thing is,
you're keeping the seat warm.
You're in the seat while we find a real coach. Is kind of the sense I got.
How'd that make you feel?
Completely overwhelmed. And because
no, but I'm the third choice. I'm the
So that part I acknowledged.
I'm the candidate they settled for.
Yeah, real matter-of-factly, I didn't aspire to be the head coach. When they talked to me about it, I was really still defending the old head coach. And so it wasn't like that was a smooth interview. I was actually antagonistic with those.
You were angry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
that's fascinating that you got hired.
Exactly. The players going to the athletic director, the interim at that time. But this is a real experience. But sometimes we're nudged, guided, directed, or prompted, or confirmation comes, this is what I'm supposed to do. So that actually came before I got the job, and I was like, wait, I don't want this job. And then here comes the chance to be the head coach, and but I had kind of already settled on this is what's going to happen. And not knowing why, how, or et cetera, I accept with no idea how to be a head coach. And that starts this next journey.
Here we go.
And we make it back to postseason the first year. And then by year 2, after the first year, we make it back to postseason or in a bowl game. Then we go 11-2, 11-2, 10-3, 11-2, and win right at 10 games for those 11 years.
After that first successful season as head coach, is that the point at which you knew, actually, this job's mine for keeps? I'm not just keeping a seat warm?
I don't think so. I don't think it was after the first year. I think it was after that stretch I just talked about, where not only is the seat going to be warm, this might be some of the best football being played in college football anywhere. Mm-hmm. And certainly when I left BYU, Lavelle Edwards was a Hall of Fame head coach there. Iconic and just amazing in every way. And through that same stretch, I think he had won 2 or 3 more games by winning percentage. And that was, I think, startling to a lot of people of how is this happening based on how it started and that selection process.
And how old were you when you slid into that seat?
I was young. I think I was the second youngest head coach at that time, maybe 35.
So quite young by head coaching standards. Yeah. Okay.
So there's this experience happening, and you asked earlier about keeping the seat warm, etc. Even though then during that stretch we were starting to have double-digit win success as normal, I wasn't convinced that this is really what I wanted to keep doing, and meaning, so I'm an introverted person by nature, and a deep thinker by nature.
You sure don't seem like it.
And so here's this extroverted person's job with complete visibility and expectations in front of everyone, having to be on all the time.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? How is this working?
Yeah.
And if purpose doesn't override individual feelings or of inadequacy or whatever, then man, that's a hard thing to figure out. So I read this book. This is year 3 of being the head coach at BYU.
Oh, I'm about to write another thing down.
So I read this book, and it's called The Power of Full Engagement.
The Power of
Full Engagement. And it's written by Dr. James Lair. And so I find out he's running this performance institute in Florida. And I have some coaching friends, and they have an interest, and so they close down the facility for 4 of us that go. 2 had just won national championships in their sport. I won't share who they are.
And by the way, this was during your tenure
at BYU after my 3rd season.
After your 3rd season.
We just gone 11-2 twice back to back, and had the nation's longest winning streak. And there's a lot of cool things happening. And I was like, wait, this isn't sustainable. This is, I'm not sure this is the right thing. Even though the record and everything else and the impact was yes. And so I go to this seminar and with these 3 other men. And again, you would know them all, and they're in a similar place. And one was describing, he's holding up the crystal ball. That's the national championship, and confetti's coming down, ESPN, the whole thing. And while he's holding up the crystal ball, he's saying to himself, "There's got to be more than this. This is not worth it." So he's there. Those are the people I'm with, right? Here's all the success.
Wow.
But yeah,
you're holding the national championship
above
trophy.
your head while confetti coming down on TV, and at the same time in your head your narrative is there's got to be more than this. So
Bronco, bringing this full circle, this is you walking off that field at BYU after just accomplishing your dream.
And so achievement alone doesn't take fulfillment deep enough. Connecting it to purpose is essential.
Yeah.
So the first question, this Dr. Lair comes out, and there's just 4 of us, right? The giant thing, but we're just, because we're like, no, we don't want anyone to know we're there, and trying to sort this out.
Sure.
And the first question he asks us, he looks at us, he goes, who are you without your job, without your title, and without your money?
You're a father. You're a husband.
So there you go. So we spent the next number of days crafting what we call our ultimate missions and defining who we really are outside of those 3 things. And then linking a purpose and strategy that would bring that to life in some compelling and meaningful way.
Was this done in an afternoon?
This was, I think, 3 days is I think what it took, if I remember.
Okay,
back.
so it was a retreat.
Arrive in the night, maybe 2 days of work and 2.5.
Why were the 4 of you gang together? What was the commonality?
Just similarity of place where we were, and we had.
And did you coordinate it amongst yourselves, or was there a higher?
2 of us coordinated,
okay,
and the other 2 were kind of coordinated. Of wait, you guys are doing what? Count me in.
Can we tag along?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, that's how it was formed.
And that's year 3.
That's year 3 of my coaching career at BYU. But without that, so gosh, I don't know. I'm in the grocery store for the life of a head coach. And by the way, this isn't anything. This reality. This I'm not complaining.
No.
So go get groceries, and there's in that community, you're very well known. You don't go anywhere.
Oh yeah,
you don't go anywhere without being recognized and without the primary topic being your job.
Yep.
Not only your job, how to do your job, and then the results either overinflated or overreacted to. And anytime you're in public, right, that's how it is.
Sports evokes emotion.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And so adjusting to that, not complaining, just adjusting to it.
It is what it is.
So grocery shopping, church, going to get tires on your car, wherever, right? The mailman writing letters to you on your letters before he puts them in, like what plays to run. Like there's no escaping it. So I guess my point is, coming to grips with all that, there better have been a great way to manage it, but also a great purpose to link it to.
Well, and something to ground you.
There you go.
I mean, that can go to your head and change you as a person.
There you go. And conversely, if there wouldn't have been success, that could actually affect your self-concept, right?
Well, you skew the other way, right?
That's my point.
The world's, the sky's falling. The world's over.
That's my point.
Yeah.
Right? So anyway, all of that at that early stage helped. And who would have guessed the way that I got the job, right, would have led to the sustained success. But it took some steps along the way, intermittent steps, as the leader to ground and focus, but also, organizational design and study and reading and research and applying and learning and meeting with every kind of experts in other domains and cross pollinating and just getting the very best ideas and applying them to football, so the organization and the alignment could be exceptional in addition to the yield on the field. But all that, if the kids coming out of the program weren't becoming amazing people, that's still a failure to me.
I know. And I told you before we started, turning boys into men is not a cliche for you. And I can tell just in talking with you. By the way, you mentioned the, and implying that I interpreted from you at times the fame, a bit uncomfortable with it.
Understatement.
Certainly I was never at a level of being, head coach of a program like BYU, but I was the CEO of a publicly traded company with several hundred employees. And I'm not going to lie, everyone going around kind of kissing your butt, it made me uncomfortable.
Totally.
It was very inauthentic.
Totally.
And now that I'm no longer that person, it's people treat me more normal now.
Yeah.
So I get it.
Yeah, and really, in the position that you're talking about, and that we've both been in, you absolutely have to have people that will speak truth to power.
Yes.
And if you don't surround yourself with that, you can easily be affected by external environment. You can easily, and so, man, that little adage when you're young and it's sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. That's not true.
No, that's not true.
Names hurt like crazy.
Yeah.
But also, we're all susceptible to praise and influence, and that's an addictive thing, right? It feels good.
It is.
And so when you're in the positions that we're talking about, and man, my wife Holly's awesome, but if there's not a grounding, not only at home, but people at work, or you don't have it intentionally designed to hear what you have to hear, that's truth. The brutal facts, not the pretend facts. The brutal facts in real time from people that you trust. There's going to be failures of gigantic proportions.
I want to give you a very real example today. Elon Musk. I mean, the man is a genius. What he's done, with SpaceX, the launchers, and Starlink, and what he's done for the electric vehicle market is just astounding. What he's doing today, I look at it and I'm like, he doesn't have people. He's surrounded himself with yes men. No one is telling him, actually, Elon, that's a really stupid idea. I don't think you should do that. To me, I see we're seeing that happen in real time.
And wow, is it necessary? And so in assembling this staff, I'll jump just quickly, and I know that's not where we are right now, but when I assessed the University of New Mexico, its current state as a football program, its place in the market at the Group of 5 level, its place in the national landscape of college football, its place in the Mountain West Conference, its place historically as a football team with 3 winning seasons out of the last 17. So that quick, basically snapshot. And what will that take? And why would someone take that on? And is it possible? That invigorates me like crazy as to help that entire narrative become something of substance.
Yep.
But in terms of who first and then what, that's not only the players but the people. So I have an offensive coordinator that's 17 years, has been with me, a defensive coordinator 19, a chief of staff for 19, a special teams coordinator 16, I think is that number. I've seen them in every circumstance and vice versa.
You guys finish each other's sentences?
They'll walk in and they'll say exactly what has to be said. They're not enamored by the head coach. We're people to people. We're person to person.
Yeah.
The titles, they're relevant at times and irrelevant most of the time.
Yep.
And then every other person in my building is a former player, which means fiercely aligned, has been through exactly what these kids are going to go through in circumstances similar but not identical.
Yeah.
And going from something not so good to good.
Yeah.
And they've lived it and they've breathed it and they know how to come out the other side with that.
Yeah.
And so there's not only the alignment piece, there's the truth-telling piece, as well as the stability piece of, the winds aren't going to blow us. We've seen plenty of battles together. And the leadership has seen that, innovated against it, has taken lumps, have the scars to show it, but also had the successes. And over that's been way more winning than losing and way more success than not. And the 16 of 17 postseason appearances with us being together. And then the young coaches living that, to me, that's an atypical assembly of people to take on an atypical job that needs something that's not typical to overcome it.
Yeah.
And so that was all designed for, and I think we get exactly what we designed for. And so you have to have the vision and insight as well as knowledge to calculate all of that and then plan for it accordingly to craft the change necessary. And all of that is still surrounded by the purpose of why you do it.
Got it.
That whole thing, to me, is a cool way to live. And I pursue those things.
Yeah. So you brought up New Mexico, so let's jump to New Mexico. But to get there, so long career at BYU. I'm actually I'm curious why you would leave BYU. It's where you're from. It's your faith. It's
many.
But I think I can guess why. Some sort of constraint or boundary condition suddenly became a roadblock. Then you go to Virginia. Again, an interesting choice of a school, not necessarily known as a football powerhouse. Great school academically, good basketball too. Spent 6 years there, turned that program around. Again, at BYU, you inherited a bit of a mess, turned it around, wildly successful. Now they're the BYU that we all know in the Big 12. Kind of did the same thing at Virginia, then left. I suspect I can guess why. Sabbatical, and then UNM. So two-part. No, I think I answered my own question about why you've left your organization. We probably don't need to drill into that. I've been dying to ask you, why did you come to University of New Mexico? Because it couldn't have been for money.
Yeah.
And I'm almost certain you had other very tangible offers.
Yeah.
Why here?
Great question. And perceptive insights along the way as to possible departures, circumstances for each place. And so at the end of my tenure and when I stepped away, and each choice has been surprising and startling to many and not understood by many. And I get that. So when I chose to step, what I call pause my career after my time at UVA, which was, 2-10 to the Orange Bowl in 4 years, and then 5 of the 6 years postseason eligible, which hadn't happened there in 22 years. Average student at UVA is 4.3 GPA. And yet, just to give maybe our listeners a little more insight before I answer the UNM question, when Holly and I were considering leaving BYU, we had 3 criteria. One, a program had to be desperate to make a change in their football program, meaning they were really poor and they truly wanted to be better. They wanted to compete at the highest level. This was when I was leaving BYU, going to UVA. and they had to care deeply about something else other than football. If those three criteria were checked, then we would consider. That was after, again, BYU for 13 years, 11 as the head coach. The University of Virginia at that time really struggling in football. Mm-hmm. Gosh, the educational component there is so powerful, and the type of students they attract. And so that checked kind of in addition to football, what did they really love to do?
Was it challenging to recruit to, though, because of the academic standards?
Exactly.
Okay. Okay.
And I actually like that.
Yeah. I mean, again, if the listeners aren't aware, University of Virginia is, I think it's fair to call it an elite school. Academically, it is about as good as it gets.
That's true. And so, again, the average student there is a 4.3. And they're in the ACC. And so this idea, wait, is it possible to play really good football with an institution where the average student's a 4.3?
Yeah.
And is that the reason why maybe UVA hasn't played great football?
Yeah.
And there were plenty during those struggling years at BYU that saying you can't have great standards in whatever area they might be and achieve great football, right?
Yeah.
Those are restrictive or mutually inclusive. And I've always liked the idea of proving that narrative wrong. I actually think that contributes. High standards in one can contribute to the other. So anyway, I was driven to share that narrative and accomplish that at UVA. And so again, gosh, I'll never forget being on the plane with our team, landing to play in the Orange Bowl in year 4, and seeing those kids that, I mean, they couldn't make eye contact their first year. They were so just defeated and broken and didn't think they were capable. And here they were, right? It was just amazing and so powerful. And so after I stepped away, no one knew that was coming. Mm-hmm. At UVA, that coincided with, and you and I talked about this a little bit before the podcast, my wife and I just became empty nesters. And my choice, I wasn't willing just to let life just roll into the next year and the next cycle without Holly and I redeciding what is it we're supposed to do, why, where, all those details.
When you left Virginia, you have a ranch in Montana, correct?
Didn't at that time.
Oh, you didn't?
No.
Oh, okay. So that was you left Virginia and you said, let's go get a ranch.
Holly is from Montana. We were finishing a home there already.
Okay.
And that was going to be a second home. In the world of coaching, you have a little time in July, and that was going to be a place we would always go in the summers to visit. But then eventually, right, would be the compound for our sons when they were married and their spouses and grandkids, and that would be kind of our infrastructure for the future.
Base.
Exactly.
Home base. Yeah.
And so when I stepped away, the idea was we'll take 2 seasons and craft and make sure that infrastructure is set for the future.
That's awesome. Actually, I was going to say this for the end, but where do you call home?
Great question. I think Montana's home.
Okay.
And so for the listeners that don't know, at Virginia, the animals became part of our selection and assessment criteria, as well as how we ran the program there.
I have a number of questions about that.
So we're in Virginia living on 30 acres, and we have horses, and I make this decision, and we sell that place.
Which was beautiful, by the way.
It's magical.
Yeah.
And come to Montana, but the ranch isn't established yet. We had property, but that's separate from our home, and so 80 acres. And so I went to work on building a ranch. And
are you up in the mountains? Are you in the high country? Okay.
So we're in Big Fork, Montana, which is up near Kalispell, which is kind of like Glacier National Park, northwest.
So pretty far north.
Mm-hmm.
What's your elevation?
Gosh, I can't even tell you right off the bat.
Everyone in Colorado has their elevation tattooed on their arm.
I don't have it memorized. But we live right on Flathead Lake, which is 15 miles wide by 30 miles long, kind of like an ocean.
I think I know where that is.
Giant.
Okay.
And then our ranch property's close. So anyway, the past 2 years, so horses, we're roping horses and training, buying, selling, as well as fencing, putting the pens in, the corrals, and so anyway, at the end of 2 seasons, football seasons, which I hadn't had an open season since kindergarten prior to that.
Well, good for you. And it was just you and your wife?
Yep. And so we're just working on creating our future with our kids and their family and our posterity, but the whole time contemplating what's next for us.
I get it. So you spend those 2 years, you basically build out your home base. And by the way, our train's coming again. You build out your home base. And so you get to the end of that 2 period and you look around and you say, okay, yep, this is good. I got it. I got everything I need. What's next? Is that?
Yeah, and we've been asking the what's next during that period, and I did a podcast along the way, and that was really fun, consulting other head coaches, which, gosh, so many were in a similar place.
So you kept your pinky toe in the world.
Yeah, kind of speaking. And then, as you mentioned, opportunities came at the end of year one, and our listeners would think, man, why didn't you do that?
So offers rolled in after year one, you turned them down?
Yeah, and that's challenging, but it felt too early in relation to the clarity, the purpose, and what we still had to do there.
So it felt too early because you had a job in Montana that was unfinished.
That's what it felt like.
Good. That's awesome.
Which is forever, right? To get that right. And I'm a family first, last, always person.
Yeah.
And there is peace and solace that comes with knowing that's set.
I get it.
And so then that leads to the end of the second fall, and opportunities are starting. Man, they start early, right? As soon as now, because of the pressure, week 3, if a coach isn't having success, search firms start checking out. And so, New Mexico wasn't a destination. I coached Danny Gonzalez, and so, man, we're following New Mexico, hoping. Right,
Danny Gonzalez. I've
awesome.
only met him a few times,
He's awesome.
But he just seems like a phenomenal human being.
And so I coached him when I was here the first time, and so we're not even thinking, that's not even one of the searches we're in, and so anyway, it comes all the way down to the end, and I think it was the last job filled, and in the cycle, the normal cycle. And as Holly and I are just kind of contemplating, we're thinking, so we love challenge, we love transformation, we love making things and people and organizations better, we love having an impact, we love having an influence, but we also love powerful stories that are created that can be lasting and substantive, not only based on outcome, but on methodology. And purpose. And there started to be alignment with, you asked why New Mexico. Number one, where could there be a more compelling story told? Who possibly?
Well, the only direction to go is up.
pretty much, right? And when it goes up, there'll be amazing.
The impact on this community.
That's it. Impact and influence. If you're saying, to shorten all that down, impact and influence in teaching important things along the way.
Tell me about the alignment with the university, because you said before you've got a certain way of doing things. You and I are very similar. We don't just follow rules for the sake of following rules. They got to make sense.
I would say aligning, not alignment. And so that's a work in progress.
It's a work in progress.
And I think that has to be. There could be some ready-made alignments. Very few of those, I think. And as I learn more about the University of New Mexico now, and our current leadership now, and they learn more about me now, aligning is part of the process and is an essential part. And man, you could start with great alignment and be misaligned after year one.
Yeah.
You could be completely aligned or misaligned in year one and become aligned increasingly so year 2, 3, 4, right? That's a fluid thing. And there are multiple parties that decide that along the way. If the destination is the same, the alignment usually follows.
Absolutely.
And if we're interested...
And the destination here is quite clear.
I think so. And so in terms
I think President Stokes, Eddie Nunez,
that's
is
it.
100% alignment on the destination.
That's it. And so to that point, I feel great about that. Now, how we get there, I've been hired to do that.
Okay.
Right? And so with the autonomy, with the latitude, and with trust, that's me to President Stokes and to Eddie and vice versa, right? As that relationship continues to form, which is already strong and becoming, in relation to the same destination, that gives it a really good chance.
Yeah.
And when you're overcoming difficult things and things that haven't been successful, man, the common destination, not that might be an option that we go. No, we're going there, right? So if we're mountaineering and it's stormy and it's windy and it's like...
You can turn back.
Yeah, some might.
Yeah.
We're going there.
Okay.
And I'm convinced that's where we're going. Otherwise, I wouldn't have come. And quite frankly, I don't know any time of not getting to where I've chosen to go. And
yeah, you certainly have
determined.
the track record. I think, Bronco, you joined the university at almost a perfect time. And because, you know, I was gone for a very long time, heads down, wasn't super involved. I've been back on the board of the foundation for almost 2 years now. And so I'm starting to get the lay of the land and how things worked historically, and I just have the utmost confidence in President Stokes and Eddie Nunez. And so, and honestly, I don't think this existed a decade ago. And so I do think you're joining at a great time. You know, I'm sort of on the sidelines as a cheerleader, doing what I can, and actually I want to get into some of the stuff I'm involved in as it pertains to your world. But I just wanted to put it out there.
No, I feel the same way. And those things, by the way, anytime there's a prospective coach being considered, that's happening from both sides.
Oh, that's a two-way street.
Totally.
Yeah.
And so this wasn't a random, now after hire, let's see how this works. That's a no. And so I want to make sure our listeners know confident and believe in the alignment and the destination, but also make sure anytime there's a new relationship, right, the thought that just starts and everything's perfect to begin, everyone gets to know each other, just as you mentioned, you've been on the board for about 2 years and now you're getting the lay of the land. There's a process of discovery.
Yeah, you've only been here a few months.
Yeah, and we don't, in my job and a lot of jobs, right, the clock has already started, results have to happen. Usually the time frame is 3 years or less. And that's just a matter-of-fact thing, right? So we have to accelerate the discovery process, work hard on the alignment and trust components, ensure the destination frequently, right? Make sure we get the feedback on have we deviated at all, and if so, how far? And now getting back on track, and how are we aligned with that? We're still going here. And so that's a continual process that has to be great. But does it take energy, time, maintenance? Any great relationship, any lasting relationship, and anyone especially of trying to do something significant that hasn't been done before, man, if you leave that to its own devices, right, the natural tendency is for that to drift apart, not unify. Sometimes the power of the purpose and the destination is so compelling, it actually
it
overrides, and keeps you closer because you have to declare so deeply to go in that direction, which is, I think, what this is. And then, right, the subtleties of the relationships along the way come, and I'm not presenting in any way, shape, or form they're not strong. This is just the matter-of-factness of, man, if anyone's in this position or finds himself where I am and taking on something new, gosh, you have to invest really strongly in the people that you're working with and aligning with that are, gosh, the president and the athletic director. If the president, AD, and head football coach get along well and communicate well and see similarly in terms of vision and purpose and destination, there's a great chance there's going to be success.
Right. And knowing all three of you in the way that I do, I have a high degree of confidence that's going to happen. That's going to happen.
As do I.
My last football question, and you know, I made a reference to things that I'm involved in. I find your job fascinating because the very landscape of your job is changing. It's out of your control. It's happening, and just, you know, what am I referring to for the listeners? It's this combination of name, image, likeness, and transfer portal. I attended your, I'll just call it a coming out party for lack of a better word, where we met at the Downs.
I remember.
And I was sitting next to you, and someone was speaking. And you leaned over to me and you said, Doug, never in my wildest dreams when I got into this career did I think I would be talking to players about money. And that just blew me away because I got it. You know, you enter in with this holistic, I want to turn boys into men and I want to do it through football, and you have a football mind, and yeah, you recruit, but you're not writing checks. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're selling them on, look at this journey that I can take you on. Now it's money. And you know, I have it was when I first was introduced to name, image, likeness, my initial reaction was yuck.
Totally.
I don't like this at all. And of course, we're now seeing what other, you know, conference realignment, and it just is blowing up the sport. And the funny thing is, nobody likes it. Nobody likes that the Pac-12 is going away. Nobody. I don't think anyone other than the players. I don't think they really like name, image, likeness. However. And this is what I concluded when I sat down with Kurt Roth, and this is why I'm a big contributor, is I may not like it, but it's here.
Totally.
And it is what it is. And it's about, and the community has to invest. And again, just so the listeners are aware, funding for name, image, likeness does not come from the university. It has to come from private donations, from people like me. And so it's not like UNM can fund this. This is a grassroots campaign. And the way I look at it is we're at a real pivotal moment for the University of New Mexico with conference realignment happening. Our football's been underperforming. Whether you like it or not, this is how it works. And we have got to double down now because I do not want to see this university left behind. And as I told you before we hit the recording, there's something so unique about the University of New Mexico athletics for the entire state of New Mexico. It's the only game in town. So my question to you is, I always put myself in Bronco's shoes, and I just think of you like a CEO. You've got this organization. You've got two sets of employees. You've got your other coaches, which you just spoke about, great alignment there. And then you got this other set of employees. They're young. They got 1 foot in, 1 foot out the program. How have you managed, and how have you reacted?
Wow, that's a great question and a challenging context for many. When I was hired in December, and a lot of these changes, as I was hosting my podcast the last 2 years, talking to my colleagues, and their reactions were every time that they went recruiting, they felt like they had to take a shower after because they felt dirty. Like, what are we doing? And
when you left Virginia, none of this was happening.
No, so I was on the board of directors of the American Football Coaches, and we'd been wrestling and trying to construct oversight and who could govern and how would that look, what would that look like. And we knew immediately once name, image, and likeness happened, while it was supposed to be for current student athletes so they could earn as other students did and benefit from that, we knew it would immediately go to recruiting. Recruiting was the least governed, the most difficult to enforce, and I'm talking NCAA-wise, the most understaffed, and where all of the violations were happening. So it already had the fewest guardrails with the most violations because it's about talent, right? And so name, image, and likeness, we all saw it. This is going to go immediately to, and even though it's presented right now as it's not supposed to be pay for play, that's a complete lie.
That's what it is.
The value of the market and what a player's worth is right now is in relation to how well he plays, no matter who wants to say whatever. And so while you're not supposed to say that or do that, right, anyway, that's the market, and we knew that's what it would be even then. So when I left, that was where it was, and then it all happened. And my conversations with the other coaches were talking about that. So then it was like, okay, now what do we do and how do we do this? Not only, as you're asking me what that's like, it's not only now for the benefit of a player, can you have name, image, and likeness drive a team culture that brings team closer together, that brings team cultural values to the forefront? Or is this now simply a free agency and each player playing for themselves, wearing different colors because now they can transfer 5 times in their career, once each year, for whoever will pay them most, which happens professionally for more mature young men still, but also that's for profit and for entertainment, and it's professionalized. So college sport now, with less guardrails, a less clear plan, is looking to do the same thing. So back in context, now put that in coaching change.
Yep.
So when I was hired at the University of New Mexico, 19 players were already in the transfer portal before I arrived. That's fairly typical with a coaching change. Some of them were approached, would you like to then stay under the current direction? The first thing that many asked or inquired about was?
NIL.
Yeah, what's the NIL? Meaning, how much would I get?
Yep.
That's even before relationships established. That was the lead. And so quickly moved on from them.
Yep.
And then here's the rest of the team. And this would be for any coach taking over program at New Mexico. They didn't choose me, right? And so here they are, here I am. And now what? So some of them, maybe they had existing NIL deals. Well, that structure could be completely different under the new head coach.
Yep.
And so what will that look like? And then what's that culture going to look like? What do the schemes look like? What does the new coaching staff look like? So there's this other period, and we've had 17 players leave since the time from when I was hired to you and I talking today. So that's 36. That's not including walk-ons. So we've added 60 new players since the time I arrived. 43 new scholarship players. By the way, for our listeners, there's 85 players on scholarship in a Division I roster. So that means we've replaced over half the scholarship players. That's either through culture, alignment, NIL, or et cetera. Everyone in the program now has chosen to come to this program or re-chosen under the current circumstances. So what are those in terms of NIL?
Yeah.
The very first initiative when I was hired was to examine NIL, not only nationally, but regionally and more specifically within the Mountain West Conference.
Right.
What are the benchmarks?
Right.
And then if I was thinking about, okay, why would someone come to New Mexico rather than San Jose State? Why would they come to New Mexico rather than Colorado State? Why would they come to New Mexico rather than UNLV, San Diego, whatever?
Yeah.
Under the current circumstances, so one of the initial easy entry points was, wait, this coach, this staff, this has always worked. They always win. And man, there's been 115 NFL players this coach has coached, where we can win and I could be developed, and that track record is really strong. So
Yeah.
there's a differentiator right there. That's enough to get interest. And the next question is
NIL.
How are you going to do that?
Yeah.
And at the group of 5 level, what I believed is, in addition to that first leadership point, what if the University of New Mexico, let's say we're top 5% in all group of 5. That would be a compelling argument.
Yep.
But what if, right, most in NIL, especially at the Power 5 level, are using lots of that money on the front end to induce players to come and entice players to come? Well, what if you have limited funds and that money has to be spent accurately, right? So the idea would be...
describes University of New Mexico.
There it is.
Yep.
And so having grasped that, what if we could be really competitive in our market,
Yep.
spend exact dollars,
Yep.
not waste a single one, and yet the potential for a player to come in and qualify for that higher than their competitors, but also protect investors' money of it's only going to go to return on investment that's going to help the program. How do we design that?
Yep.
While bringing the team closer together and driving unity.
Which is exactly why I posed the question.
Yep.
I mean, myself, having had hundreds of employees, people do the strangest things over money.
So I think we have a fantastic model, very unique model, unlike anything in college football.
Yeah.
And I think it's working really well. And so again, my job is to develop, my choice is to develop young people. I do it through football. And one of the things I love to talk about is earned, not given.
Yep.
And that means qualifying for. And so what if along the way, right, you could achieve maybe beyond what anyone else in our league could achieve, but you have to earn and qualify for that. And the return is later, not earlier. Yet the amount is greater than, not equal to, our competitors.
So you had, in one video I was watching, you had earned, not given banner.
Yeah.
I think it was on the practice field
Yeah.
for University of Virginia.
Yeah.
Where is it at UNM?
So it's on the windscreens being developed now.
Okay.
There's also a sign right when you come into the building that says "Earn Not Given." You walk right by it.
Okay.
And to give our listeners just a clue, at the University of Virginia, and this is continuing here. I like the idea of the martial arts, and if you or I were to go in and
I know where you're going with this.
yeah, if we were to go in and let's say we want to learn Taekwondo or Jiu-Jitsu or whatever, we would start with a white belt, regardless of our age.
Yep.
5-year-old, 50-year-old. If we have no experience, you're going in with a white belt.
Yep.
And you have a chance, when ready, to demonstrate competency and test to earn a higher color. And you demonstrate competency, you earn a higher color. In that case, for us, it's light gray. You move from white to light gray. And so our players are wearing different colored gear. And after light gray, you can stay in light gray as long as you want, or you can move.
What's next?
And after light gray, right, is dark gray.
Okay.
After dark gray is red.
I believe you mean cherry.
Cherry, sorry. Yep. And after cherry and dark gray, we call it anthracite.
Okay.
After anthracite is cherry, and then there's a black belt at the top. And so qualifying for, right, independent of age, independent of year, independent of
Merit
position.
only.
Yep, you earn it. I can't wait. And the team can't wait for you to do that. The more players we have in color, the better we're going to be.
Bronco, it is such a cool system because I feel like you played the cards you were dealt, and you've come up with a system that operates within the confines of NIL.
Yep.
But I feel like you've done it in a manner that doesn't obliterate your culture.
Yeah.
And by the way, I don't expect you at all to get into the details of what you've done with NIL because that's your intellectual property.
Yeah, exactly.
So keep that as a trade secret. Yeah. I've gotten a little sneak peek under the hood, and I think it's awesome. Yeah. It's unique. I think it's a great fit for the University of New Mexico.
That's my assessment. It was designed specifically for the University of New Mexico at this time, at this place, in this landscape, with this coach to differentiate and to give us a competitive advantage.
Yep.
And
I think it's great. Yeah. So I'm really excited to see what happens on the field.
Yeah.
Where I told you that was going to be my last football question. I've only got 2 more questions. Great. So bringing this full circle, I mentioned you and I share a lot of similarities. Love for the big mountains. My version's just a lot closer than yours.
Yeah. Smart.
But the fact that we were both here, late 90s, early 2000s, we both left New Mexico for roughly about the same period of time, a little over 2 decades. We did obviously wildly different things, but kind of similar things.
Kind of similar.
Led organizations, raised a family, became empty nesters, and then boomeranged back. How are things similar or different at the University of New Mexico? And same question about the city of Albuquerque.
Yeah, I'm discovering both.
Okay.
So my lens is not a complete lens yet, and with the amount of work and just in transforming this program and a re-arrival, and so from December till now, I'll qualify it. I had forgotten, and my wife Holly, as she's been back and forth, she's still managing our ranch and trying to get all the affairs in order before she'll be here in the fall.
Okay.
But in her visits and when I'm talking to her, the people here are so genuine and so authentic.
Yes.
And grounded and hopeful. And I'm talking regarding not only their personal qualities, but now in relation to football.
Yeah.
Grateful and hopeful and almost desperate. And that was similar before. And I felt that as we won 3 games, then 4, then 5, then 6, then 7, and 8 in consecutive years. And I watched the stadium become full, and it became a really hard place to play, but a great place to be as a member of the community. And so I sense a longing for that. The kindness of the people of the city and anyone I've come in contact with. And I would say the blue-collar, gritty, resilient, hardworking, and the values that I see playing out remind me of before. And there is I would say almost an inspiring, day-to-day battling approach that is just I find compelling, and that invigorates me, especially kind of in a university setting where education and opportunity and optimism for the future, but it's surrounded by real life stories of just really cool things happening in such a diverse community, which I really like. So I've been reminded of all of that, which was similar to before. Now the differences are the scale. Wow, the west side and the population from when I was here before.
I know. I just visited the Rio Rancho campus for UNMH. I just kept driving and driving and driving.
So that to me, the scale is significantly different. But with scale can come impact, and which I really like.
Growth brings change.
And growth brings change, which I think is great. If you now put it, what's different, what you just described in terms of landscape, that's just the sports world. And so I think you might be able to apply similar things to the educational world, the political landscape. So I would say here's this amazing community, still thriving and still going and still battling, and so much is changing around it, not only in the athletic world, but in the world.
Yeah.
But I'm captivated by the people and the values, and I really like that.
I'll echo that. I had forgotten just how authentic, how humble. I might argue humble to a fault. Sometimes we can toot our own horn here.
So I think that's a really good point. Humility is right at the epicenter of all that. I think that's right.
Yeah. So, okay. Final question, Bronco. I'm a young kiddo. I'm listening to this. I want to go into athletics. I want to, not as an athlete, but I want to pursue a career in collegiate athletics, despite all this noise I'm hearing about NIL and transfer portal and conference realignment. What's your advice?
Yeah, my advice is start with a service-oriented mindset. So many coming into the profession now because of the money and because of the fame and because of the attention. It's intoxicating, and the lifestyle.
Right.
It's a shallow motive, and it's not a lasting motive.
And it's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable, nor is it truly impactful, other than for yourself for a time.
Right.
And that will be gone.
Right.
If you're truly interested in athletics, think hard about how you might best serve and give to others. The greatest thing about athletics is you have motivated learners.
Yep.
They can't wait, and they're driven to become better. They want to become better. There's goals to chase. There's teams to be part of. There's this infrastructure that few in the world ever get to be part of, that's already built for you then to teach and give in a manner that's so compelling, so lasting and so visible. And so serving first is a great way to come into it, benefiting by then an existing structure, and there better be this really strong drive to every single day, I would say, learn, grow, and become, so what you're sharing can impact. And when you stop learning, I believe you become irrelevant. And so that process, as you enter, the motive is to give, but yet the power to give is through how much you learn, so you can give relevant things that will make a difference. And if you stop investing in that, what you're sharing really isn't preparing the next generation for what they need to know for the future.
I understand.
And then we're no longer experts, and they'd probably find someone else.
Yeah. Bronco, you need to write a book. With your infinite amount of free time.
Yeah.
All right, Bronco. Well, thank you so much for joining me on Leaders of Enchantment podcast.
Thanks, and for our listeners, so what you're hearing and who you're hearing it from, there's an intent to make a difference through this podcast.
Absolutely.
And it's a call to arms, and I'd appreciate all of you considering. We could use your help, but also, listening to the leaders through the podcast, there's so much to learn and so many ways to be inspired. So, future is looking bright.